And the question is, can you hear me? You can still hear me, right? Yes?
Yes.
No? Yes. Okay. Okay, well, let's start on time. Welcome, everyone. And thank you for joining us today. My name is Ellen Kaufman, and I am so pleased to be hosting today's reading of Able Muse Poets, which is part of an ongoing. Is everybody muted? Let's see. Okay, sorry. And this is part of an ongoing series of Able Muse writers. And we have three impressive poets reading this afternoon: Marianne Corbett, Frank Osen, and Matthew Buckley Smith. And all three have been praised for their formal expertise and agility, but some of the other terms that have been applied to their work are grace, wit, beauty, wisdom, wildness, precision, humility, clarity, and passion. So I think we're in for an enjoyable afternoon. They will read in alphabetical order, and I will introduce each one before the reading, before each reading. And then at the end, there will be a short Q&A. So feel free at that point to chime in with your comments or your questions, and you'll have to unmute yourself at that point to talk. And if you wish to applaud, you can, after each reading, you can unmute yourself and applaud, or you can just use the icons, the Zoom icons, to show your appreciation. Before we begin, I would like to introduce Mr. Alex Keppel, the founder and head of Able Muse Press and its newer imprint, Word Galaxy. Alex's poetry, fiction, and essays have appeared in Think, River Styx, Barrow Street, American Arts Quarterly, Measure, and other places. He also directs Erratosphere, the online literary workshop, and he edits the Able Muse Journal and the Able Muse Anthology. And I can say from experience that Alex is a really exceptional editor. So Alex, would you like to say a few words?
Certainly. Thank you very much, Ellen, and welcome everyone. It's good to see you all again for another Able Muse event. And today I'm pleased with the readers we have. We have two winners of the Able Muse Book Award, and we have Marianne, who has been published, has one of the most collections from Able Muse Press we've published. So that should be a treat for everyone. So, and look forward to it being a fantastic event. And without further ado, take it away, Ellen.
Okay, Alex, thank you. Our first reader, Marianne Corbett, earned a doctorate in English from the University of Minnesota in 1981, and she expected to be teaching Beowulf and Chaucer and the history of the English language. Instead, she spent almost 35 years working for the Office of the Reviser of Statutes of the Minnesota State Legislature, helping attorneys to write in plain English and coordinating the creation of finding aids for the law. And as a law librarian, I can tell you the finding aids are really important. She is now the author of 5 full-length collections of poetry, most recently In Code from Able Muse. Her work has won the Willis Barnstone Translation Prize and the Richard Wilbur Award, and has appeared in many journals, including Able Muse, Barrow Street, Christianity and Literature, The Dark Horse, Ecotone, Rattle, River Styx, Southwest Review, and Subtropics. It has been featured in Poetry Daily, Verse Daily, American Life in Poetry, and the Poetry Foundation website, and has been included in Measure for Measure, an anthology of poetic meters, and the Best American Poetry of 2018. So Mary, after that impressive list of accomplishments, I am pleased to turn this over to you.
Okay, have I successfully unmuted myself?
Yes, you have. Go ahead.
Okay, then I will say thank you, Ellen, for hosting. Thank you, Alex, for doing all this and arranging. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I have, as you heard, 3 Able Muse books, and I love them all equally, so I'm going to try to read 2 poems from each. I may not get that far. Ellen will cut me off at my 15-minute limit.
No, I won't. I will not.
I will begin with In Code, which, as you heard, is about those 35 years that I spent working for the legislature. This is the book's opening poem. It's called Threats. Attention, barks the voice out of the speaker. And once again, attention. And our fingers peck, close documents, log off devices, grab coats, yank at the bags we schlep our lives in. A threat has been reported in this building. Who on this sky blue April day believes it? Not the last holdouts, sitting there still screen glued, peering round-shouldered at the tasks before them. The voice squawks orders, end stopped, razor edgy. We file outdoors to our assigned location. Was there a warning at the Murrah building? None. Only the rage of the explosion monstrously heard at 55 miles distant. That was an April day. The sun was shining. The wounded building gaping in the daylight, the children bleeding in the arms of firemen. But not here, not today. Today, some foul up, a fault of wiring, burnt toast in the break room has sprung us, laughing here among pink roses and petals drifting from the flowering crab trees. Something could happen, yes. We know things happen. We have our work, our lives, for the time being. The office I worked for at the legislature was very strictly nonpartisan, so I really couldn't write much about the work until I finally retired about 5 years ago. The book includes a few poems about retirement too, and this is one of them. It's the book's final poem, An Ancient in First Year Greek. Well, yes. It's odd. Past 65 with more gray hair than a Sistine ceiling god, mildly I face the board among these shining-faced and slightly nervous young, bumbling along with them in kindergarten lisp and stammer through bafflements of grammar and strange opacities of alphabet. Already, I think their shoulders slump a bit beneath their debt. But in this room, we equally ignore the susurration of the rising sea, the roar of Syrian bombers, the drowned children on the beaches, the looming dark age misery that teaches despair and skull-numbed fear. Yet here we are, poor dreamers, laboring at the lore of tongues that have seen the world collapse before, and that will know when it comes crashing down, when dire becomes most dire. Old stories, good to chant around a fire. I'm going to switch now from my newest Able Muse book to my oldest one, Credo for the Checkout Line in Winter. My second book, but my first one from Able Muse. It's organized largely according to season, and I'm going to start with spring. and a poem called Emergences, which has an epigraph from Gerard Manley Hopkins. Nothing is so beautiful as spring. The mud sucks up the filthy snow and swallows. From the shrunken mass, the bus stop beer cans crown and grow. A season's meanness dots the grass. We wait, we wait. The weather breaks. It heaves the bones of old mistakes, where gulls pick trash from parking lots and dandelions brood the seed set to subvert our garden plots. We pick our poisons, weed by weed, and plan. We plan. We never learn. These are the tricks the seasons turn. While down the alley's potholed lines, through muscled open windows come the mower motors' manic whines, and street rods at the stoplights hum hard vices in their deepest throats. Decades old, discordant notes. Menace we never quite forget. We wait. We are not younger yet. And because it's summer again now, and we're in the midst here of a huge, sad tree removal program again, I'll read this poem, Dutch Elm. That trees would die yearly, we knew. The columns of the nave of Summit Avenue, the architrave of open work where canopies unfold, green or briefly gold, the arched leaf-dripping limbs backlit with sky. In every year, some go. Some ends arrive with force, the papers worn with pictures after every storm of fallen branches, hollow at the heart, or great trunks snapped apart, battering cars and houses with the blows. We knew, but now we know. Some ends are quiet, the red stripes appearing like a garroting wound on trunks where the inspectors found beetles in bark, bare limbs lurking in shade. The tree crew and the chainsaw blade will come. We know now, soon. The stripe says, this is dead. They make short work of things with sweat and cherry pickers, saws and zeal, rope and rappelling acrobatic skill, and limb shredding machines. Only the stump remains and is soon sawdust. Nothing left to chance but next year's fairy rings. No help for it then, this cut to sky, this coring of the heart, these trees too far apart, this just delivered bald and burlapped stick, its trunk 2 inches thick, decades from beauty. What we always knew, we start again. And I'm going to finish with poems from my book, Street View, mostly because these 2 poems are some that I have a lot of fun reading. This book is largely about particular places. And this first one was born of a visit to New York City back in 2014 to read for Carmine Street Metrics. And now I'm going to wave to all my friends in Carmine Street metrics. So here is a slightly defective ode to the West Side Y, a visit to New York with apologies to Percy Shelley. Oh, noble entry on West 63rd, whose image beckons from the internet in brownstone arches, breathing not a word of shared baths, skimpy towels, and a toilette too redolent of dorms back in the day. Oh, great location, frugal nightly net of rate plus tax. Oh, bright five-starred array in blandishments, ratings that claim I'll cop a tidy bargain for my 3-night stay. Oh, plain and simple, nothing over the top. Yo, West Side Y, I'm talking, listen up, which seems to be the more appropriate phrasing since all this O is more than slightly twee, but I digress. Done with the eyeball glazing nonstop to JFK from MSP, I'm here, admitted to your inner sanctum, lugging my wheelie toward the mystery. The clerk has offered me my key. I've thanked him. Clueless within the labyrinth, I wander. Those fantasies I had, they're gone. You've yanked them, oh dim halls, clanking radiator thunder, archaic carpets dark with ground in gum, wet bathroom floors. Later that night, I ponder the howls of student athletes having fun. I fantasize about a loaded gun. But morning, look to the right, and Lincoln Center gleams like the castles of Les Très Riches, while opposite, the seasons turned inventor of pointillist impressionism, a blur in jonquil and forsythia. Magnolias and calorie pears and red buds all concur. Winter is over. Several cardinal scolas chant early alleluias to the frou-frous of Central Park, the human centifolias, the garden social registers and who's who's. Temperatures saunter toward the 70s and marathoners blossom in pink tutus, crossing at the museum. So it's a wash, dear Y. No, it's a steal. How can I whine about the noisy nights and soggy floors when all New York's more real now than it was? Look, when a poet writes, West Broadway glitters in a mist of rain, I know now with exactness how the lights conjure that disillusion in his brain, and yellow cabs whoosh past him, 3 and 4 abreast. An image trumps a balky drain. It plants Manhattan in the deep heart's core, a solidness I didn't own before, which is the reason I'll be flying back some spring to come to start the day on Broadway, andante in the Starbucks line, and take my almond Danish and my steaming latte under the gold green trees at 63rd to sip beneath the measured gaze of Dante. Yes, I'm Midwestern, fashion senseless, stirred too slowly for this town's up-tempo zing, fuddled by subways, gawking and absurd, but coming back in spite of everything, wired up and giddy as this longed for spring. This is State Fair season here now, so I will finish with State Fair fireworks, Labor Day. Look up, blazing chrysanthemums in rows shriek into bloom above the tilt-a-whirls, hang for a blink, then die in smoky swirls. They scream revolt at what the body knows. All revels end. We clap and sigh. Then, no, another rose, another peony break, flame, roar, as though by roaring they might make the rides whirl in perpetuum, as though we need not finally, wearily turn to plow back through the crush of bodies, the lank air, to buses that inch us, sweating, across town, as though we were not dropped in silence there to trudge the last blocks home, the street lamps low, the crickets counting summer's seconds down. Thank you, everybody, for your attention. It's always a pleasure to read.
Thank you so much, Marianne. That was really
Wonderful.
wonderful. Yes, wonderful.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay. Our next reader. Okay, Frank Ozen. Frank Ozen lives in Pasadena, California. He works in the Huntington Library, which I think is also a museum and botanical gardens, and serves on the board of the Light Verse Foundation. And according to his bio, he is also an attorney, and I guess he's the kind that writes clearly. His poetry has won the X.J. Kennedy Parody Award and the Best American Poetry Poem Award. Mary Jo Salter selected his first book, Virtue Big as Sin, for the Able Muse Prize, and his poem Bookshop Stopping will appear in Poems of Books and Libraries, an anthology due out in October from Everyman's Library. So Frank, I'm excited to hear your work, and I'm sure everyone else is too, so please unmute yourself and go ahead.
I wish that I could have turned on the camera about 20 minutes earlier, and you could have seen me frantically rushing around trying to figure out sound issues and how to keep the light shining off my glasses. So I will try be half as entertaining as that performance. I'm going to start with what is a set piece for me, and I apologize to those of you who have heard me read within the last 20 years or so. You've probably heard this more times than you care to, but I'm going to begin with something called Pacific Drift. We're on the brambled slope above your house, and I'm still gazing west to Catalina, where the horizon's shortly going to douse an undulant, impossibly pink sun. Sailboats are sifting north to the marina. Laguna's pastel patch beyond that palm is like a master watercolor done in an eponymous Pacific calm. 4 years ago, it was a different story. Earth movers shifted all this rise away, and evenings you were on the phone to me, complaining that your place looked like a quarry. The county called you, though it was okay. They'd restore, and pay you for your trouble, but still it hurt you somewhere deep to see a once imposing height come down to rubble. Support has never been my strongest suit. I tend to bulldoze things. I'd scoff and say, what good was vistas that could slip away? Your lot was not as stable as it seemed. No purchase you had here was absolute. You knew unanchored places often slid. You'd have replacements like you'd never dreamed. And by degrees, within a year, you did. You drifted downward. Evening's fretfulness became upheavals of late afternoon. I'd yet to learn the doctor's term, sundowning. A home of quite another sort came soon. Erosion of more faculties and girth, a sliding toward complete forgetfulness from which you'd sometimes call like someone drowning without a footing in familiar earth. At sunsets, not so long ago, you'd stand out on that terrace, raise a toast, and note how man-made fine particulates enhance these evening skies. So when I've drunk my fill, in awkward mimicry, I raise my hand and let the bag full of your ashes float through placid twilight to the land's expanse. It's fitting you'll become your newborn hill. The next one I'd like to do is called Bookshop Stopping, and it's a parody of Philip Larkin's Church Going. And you should know that I belong to the kitchen sink school of parody writing. So those of you who know Larkin will find many more references in here beyond church going. Once I'm convinced it's open, I go in. No telling, after all, when one will close. Attentive to the owner at her desk, I smile and nod and shuffle by, not knowing as she completes our welcoming burlesque if she nods back in greeting or repose. The mind blanks at this lair where, like a sty from the last century, the vast worm-eaten, usual used brigades of shabby Babbitts and battered Chatterleys sprawl, bumped and beaten. Man hands on mystery to man. That's why this room's a study of dead reading habits. Old fools with fragile jackets, broken spines, a few no doubt unhinged, climb up the walls. Intrigued, though, by some well-worn pickup lines, a browser in a web till dawn, I read enraptured near a narrow aisle and build my own small reverential pile. I page through to the only end of pages, then say, the end, much louder than I'd meant. Books are a load of scrap, I know, on shelves. Best stay away and not have books ourselves. No screens show use by hands from other ages to hint we'll go as prior owners went. When libraries and bookshops disappear and scanners hold our poetry and prose, a large, cool Apple store is planted here, and volumes aren't part of the equation. Will someone stopping in acquire unplanned an early ebook version of Persuasion? Will books live on as little household gods when they have yellowed into mounds of silt? Who knows? Not me. The best that I can muster on everybody's future hopes and odds as I slink out with bags of books and guilt is that at least we've all outlived Blockbuster. The next I would like to read is called November Flea Market. And as you probably know, the Rose Bowl in Pasadena hosts an outdoor flea market every month. And that was what inspired me to write this years ago. November Flea Market. We've run a maze of outdoor market stalls, racing as if to catch the last display, the ultimate in old recycled wear, a line of clouds above the mountains where a gold brocade is being drawn away. More often, though, we've stopped and lingered in the jumble, browsed for brass, turned back to find each other, table hopped like ravens drawn by random bits of glass. But though we've rushed or shopped, we bought no time, and so the evening falls. Those curios that light had animated are blowing out. The leaden clouds drift west, and chrome no longer signals from the tables. The sour woman crates her orange crate labels: Adios, California Dream, Hope Chest, Cascade of Gold, and Magic Isle. Come back, O Persian moon, shine overhead. She adds the last 2 boxes to a pile and gives a waiting van the go-ahead. You catch her eye and smile. How speedily our passing day gets freighted. And standing on this playground of what was, we watch as vendors straight from central casting pack up a generation's worth of kitsch. Their aspects underscore that life's a bitch and nothing, no, not nothing's everlasting. Our pickings, secondhand and scant, and none of it endures or can be caught. And then the instant that I know it can't, a joy that bounds horizons fills my thought, faint as a dying chant. It is enough and has to do and does. I'd like to do one called Potemkin Village, Idiot. Most of you know the story of the Potemkin Village. The Tsar was touring the countryside, and his nobleman thought that it would be a good idea to make it seem more prosperous than it was, so they constructed a false front village that could be disassembled and moved down the tracks to wherever he was to go next, and then reassembled. And some scholars say that's not really what happened, that they just sort of put bunting on all the villages, made them look better. But anyway, that was the inspiration for this, which is subtitled A Riff on the Myth of Authenticity. Potemkin Village, Idiot. It grew in fame, as such things often do, because it hits us where we live, a place of neat facades one might construct on cue to gull the gullible and then unbrace and rearrange so that it's always fronting some new, intriguingly familiar face. Though scholars claim real buildings just wore bunting, the false front legend leaves us more to love. Today, on Guadalupe Beach, I'm hunting a plaster sphinx and plywood remnants of a movie set that Cecil B. DeMille junked somewhere in the drifting dunes above. How long? Near some Crimean hill, a hyper-realist Russian oligarch who's backed extensive excavations will announce a find or new amusement park. If not that genuine of the ersatz of moldered paperboard and rotted slats, then an authentic gleaming replication, complete with rides and characters in hats. I'd buy a ticket to that dedication and souvenirs from each concessionaire, but be compelled to tell the congregation more times than anyone could bear, it's not the place that really wasn't there. I wanted to close with 2 sonnets that I, in reading over for what I would wanted to read today. One was written a long time ago, and one is new-ish. And I was just struck by the contrast in what I thought it revealed about where I was at each time. The first one is called The Switches and was written in the middle of some antique financial crisis or other. The Switches. We felled the rotting tree before the rains, fearing that it might crash through a wall. But though the stump is all that still remains, neither our home nor we were spared a fall of less corporeal timber all around. That fast collapse of structures at their roots that brought uncounted households to the ground. I've come to clear the stump and find that shoots have made a thin and yet resilient stand. Observing them, I'm moved to think that we, hit by a blow for which we hadn't planned and severed from a vast old certainty, like these few switches in a rough-made cleft, may now go on to grow from what we've left. Okay, very quickly, this newisher one is called The Haint Blue Lake. On purple mornings in my front porch chair, I'm more contented than I've ever been. All ghosts are laid and earthly stores laid in. Regrets that once were agony to bear dwindle to an egret in the air. No private nightmare pulls a heartstring thin. At ease in more than my capacious skin, I tend a sunrise born in age with care and calm. Time mends, if only through the ruse of dimming what it never wholly clears. Still, remedy for pain, and praise its needle though it's brought a bruise, while blurring hurt from all those unmourned years of want, till now I want them back again. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Nice.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank you
Frank.
so much. Thanks, Frank. That was really terrific. You can hear me? I'm okay. Matthew Buckley Smith. Matthew Buckley Smith is the author of Dirge for an Imaginary World, which won the 2011 Able Muse Book Award, and Midlife, which just won the 2021 Richard Wilbur Award. And I believe that book is not out yet, so we can look forward to that coming out sometime in 2021 from University of Evansville Press. Matt is Associate Editor of Literary Matters, and he hosts the poetry podcast Slee Ricketts. And I believe that he lives in Carborough, North Carolina. So here is our third and last reader, Matthew Buckley Smith. And Matt, you will need to unmute yourself.
All right.
There you are.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you also, Karina, and especially Alex, for your endless and largely inexplicable hospitality and encouragement over the years. Thank you to Frank and Marianne. I realized, Marianne, I did my first reading with you 9 years ago when my first book was coming out, and I think your second was coming out. And now, 9 years later, you've published about 15 books, and this is my second is finally coming out. So I think I will never catch up. I wanted to start by reading a poem by Stephen Dunn, who died this past year, and has been a poet I've admired for a long time. This is called The Overt. It's from Different Hours, and it bears the probably redundant dedication For the Reader. So The Overt by Stephen Dunn. The town idiot who walked the streets with a beatific smile must have been bewildered by our stones back then when I was a child. It's an act of will and confession to bring him forward now. My first gesture to you. I hide myself from myself. To hide myself from myself, I've used various veils of weather, the hopeful smell of just cut grass. What a nice day to be alive, I've said, while headlines screamed atrocity, and I couldn't locate what I felt. The street violinist who played for me in her evening dress simultaneously lived with Bach and the clang of my coins. Nearby, a juggler succeeded in keeping three things alive. What could be more normal than a double, even a triple life? Still, I remember being surprised by the ineffectual, shy biologist at his retirement party. How well he spoke. How, even with his wife, he fast danced all night long. Though the events and dates may remain at odds, I said to my host, as we walked the Ponte Vecchio, I'd like you to believe everything I say. Is the life we lead in public obscene? Would you say that what I've offered here is overt? You must worry about trusting a man who feels he's damned and knows there's a certain charm in admitting it. That's Stephen Dunn's, the late great. This by the way, something my poetry professors always told me not to do, which was begin a reading by reminding everyone of a much better poet. So I apparently have learned nothing. This is the very last poem in my first book, from which came out with Able Muse. It's called At the Spring Ballet Exams. I used to teach English at a little ballet conservatory that they had every year. They ended the year with these exams, it was sort of like ballet stripped down to platonic forms, where there were no costumes, very minimal leotards and tights, and it was just sort of the demonstration of pure technique. And I found this sort of moving. This is At the Spring Ballet Exams. It's here they've come, the graces and the gods, unwinged to flutter through the mortal room. Not with the girls who'll leap above the odds their classmates slipped beneath while in the womb, nor shadowing the pink-faced amateurs, still swaying when the others stop or go, and sick with love no life of teaching cures. A love now come to rest in the back row. But here, where halos flicker through the host, whose form is clean and strong and nothing more, whose eyes have seldom risen to a boast, whose fates, like ours, lie mainly in the core. Among these pale, imperfect 9 or 10 retires the dream that heaven's always been. All right, this is actually, I think, the first poem from my second book. This is called The Year Of, and I would like to call it prescient or specific to some important historic year recently, but I wrote it, the first draft of it, at least quite a while ago. So we'll see. This is called The Year Of. It was not beautiful. It did not rhyme. A brick came loose. A text message came late. We lacked the understanding, then the time, to put things straight. Results were lost. Releases went unsigned. Defective units had already sold. The smaller demographics fell behind. The trail went cold. A judge enforced the non-disclosure form. The damage wasn't covered by the plan. The girl was transferred to a different dorm. The threats began. Some children were too young to understand. A biopsy was needed to confirm. The prototype, regrettably, was manned. budgets were short-term. Though we were brave, though we were dutiful, not all of us were fitted for the climb. It was not fair. It was not beautiful. It did not rhyme. Right. I very seldom write about current events, mostly just because I'm too slow to do that. But I was a little bit touched or disturbed by these stories that have come out recently about Marilyn Manson. I guess really shouldn't have been shocking that he turns out to be a big piece of shit. But he was, for those of y'all who don't know, he was a goth metal rock star from the 90s who, as it happens, seems to have been really horrible to a lot of women. So I mention only because when I was a angry teenager recovering from Catholicism, his music meant something to me. So I wrote this probably ill-advised poem recently called "To Marilyn Manson." So we'll see how it goes. To Marilyn Manson. You might be the reason I didn't kill myself one night in 98 or 99. A Southern Catholic atheist yourself, you had a voice I took back then for mine. It seems we both survived, for good or ill. Depending on the day, I can't decide. I'm over both your music and the hill, and probably too old for suicide. Meanwhile, I've learned the vicious metaphor I took you for was no figure of speech. Nor, Brian, are you Southern, Catholic, or anyone with anything to teach. And yet, for me, those early records stand apart. Somehow, I thought you'd understand. All right, trying to keep things tight and moving fast. All right, this is The Dark Woods. They are still there, the dark woods from the dream. Though everything they symbolized is gone. Though the wireless speakers unwind their tidy theme, and the tiki torches stutter on the lawn. Though the dishwasher rattles the dishes in the sink, and the dog worries his tiny rubber man, and the blinking clocks aren't certain what to think, and the fruit fly circles back to where it began. Though the interest keeps the credit cards awake, collecting in a server states apart, and the siren cries out for a stranger's sake, and the smartphone mutes its obsolescent heart. Though the box fan turns a bedroom full of breath, and the network brings the software up to date, and the skim milk dies a timely, painless death. Still, the woods you've dreamed about, they wait. Because my light in here is solar powered, so it's starting to fail. I'm going to quickly turn on the proper one. All right, there we are now. So it should be a little bit better. This is this is called Drinking Ode. It's just my dumb attempt to imitate Horace. So it's, I think it's 214 or one of those right around there. This is not by any stretch of the imagination a translation, but more of an undignified nod to Horace. This is called Drinking Ode. It's dedicated to Ryan Wilson, which I know some of y'all know, the old buddy of mine. Drink with me, old man. There's no time, and no use trying to be good. Our flesh was supple, our thoughts sublime, and now death eats us alive, and should. The gods aren't missing any sleep over the altar lights we burn to honor afterlives we keep pretending we might someday earn. The king, the peasant farmer, even you and I, and everyone, can pick the suit we'd like to leave in, but not the day the tailor's done. So cowards survive the battlefield, and bullies fill the lifeboats first. and rich kids get their records sealed. But some verdicts can't be reversed. Men say a river worms around the grove where dead souls speak again. But that black swamp has long since drowned both ferry boat and ferryman. Your land, your house, your tender wife, the trees you trimmed with your own hand, you'll leave them all when you leave this life for a ditch beneath a cypress stand. And the man who takes your place will spill your choicest vintage wine onto the white jacquard chaise-longue you still believe somehow belongs to you. All right, we're getting there. This is, I was going to offer an explanation, but I think the title is pretty self-explanatory. This is called Poem Without Metaphors. Poem without metaphors. Some days there are no other words for pain. And for the worst, the literal is best. The rain against the glass is only rain. Your heart is just a muscle in your chest. The book ends in a bookish sort of way. The moonlight stands for nothing but the moon. Your children carry half your DNA and will inherit all your savings soon. Somewhere a car is racing through the night, no faster than a swiftly moving car. A brace of deer glance up at something bright, gone still, exactly like the deer they are. And as for you, you could be anyone who's done, who's said the things you've said and done. All right, this is the conventional 2-poem warning. Not too much longer now. This poem is called Sleeping Dogs, because I couldn't think of anything more original. When we hear the news your neighbor shot herself, I'm slow to link her name to the smiling face we see every Christmas at your parents' place, and each morning on our fridge, dressed as an elf. Strange that two girls who grew up a block apart share little but a birthplace anymore. Just the spare key that you kept to her front door, and the old phone number you still know by heart. These days you've got me, to love you, not to die, to try to keep in warm, vague, tender doubt some certainties that we don't talk about, to wash the plates and stow them when they're dry, or just to shake the water from a knife and take you in my dripping arms for now, shushing the questions gathered at your brow about the kind of person who ends her life. For you, I keep that silence. For your friend, I offer to the silence where she went the hope that what she did is what she meant, and what she knew of pain is at an end. Okay, this is the appropriately titled The End. It's, I think my daughters may have at some point been listening, although I hope not to all of the, hope not to everything, but this is for them. The end. You want your bedtime story told, not read, meaning you want it made up on the spot. So, sitting at the corner of your bed, I tug my beard and stall, and like as not, begin the tale with once upon a time, and introduce a girl about your age, locked in a tower far too tall to climb, or in a golden barred, unbending cage, from which she must, in order to escape, employ both wit and heart, making new friends and losing old ones as the end takes shape, wherein a message, or a marriage, tends to leave the kingdom's fictive doors ajar, as if awaiting someone. as they are. Thanks very much, everybody.
Terrific. Terrific.
Thank you so much, Matthew.
Thank you.
No. Thank you. I guess I'm just really impressed by the three of you, as I knew I would be, and how well you all kind of complement each other. And now we're going to move into the Q&A. Does anyone want to start to, if you unmute yourself and start to speak, then that's probably the easiest way. Does anyone have a question, a comment? I saw a lot of things in the chat, but I haven't had time to
I
read
have a
them.
question. So with Joanna Pearson, are those the two the sweeties of that last poem who enjoy stories? Can you unmute yourself?
Say hi.
No, to Dada.
I'm right upstairs.
Dada.
Say hi.
Dada.
Hi. Well, that was unexpected and very nice. Thank you. I have a question for Matthew, since the name of your podcast is Slee Ricketts, and I just wondered if you wanted to explain what that means.
Sure. Slee Ricketts is the little blonde munchkin on the camera, Ellie. Slee Ricketts is her corruption of the word secrets, which she sort of misuses to mean any whispers, anything whispered. So I stole it for the podcast mostly because it would be easy to Google, and because I have to record late at night when they're asleep across the hall, and so I have to keep my voice down so I don't rouse them.
Okay. And I have a question for Marianne. I know from your bio that you won a prize for translation, but you didn't really say anything about what you translate and from which languages. So I wondered if you would just give us a sense of what you do in translation.
Very often in translating, I'm attempting to compensate for the fact that I never got an academic job, and I translate works that are medieval. The Willis Barnstone Prize, my entry was a translation of the Old English poem called Deor. It means an animal, and it's the name of a particular poet who's lamenting the fact that he's about to lose his court position to somebody else who has usurped his spot in the heart of his lord. I translate Middle French too, and I have recently gone back to attempting to translate Old Occitan. I cheat a lot on that one. So that's it, mostly medieval works, sometimes medieval Latin as well. Thank you for asking.
Oh, there's a poem you read about being in a classroom trying to learn a language, I believe. Oh.
An ancient in first year Greek. Yeah, I started Greek as I had promised myself I would for decades, finally after I retired. And that's now been like 4 years ago, and I've forgotten most of it and need to go back to it.
Okay, well, I'm duly impressed. Thank you. Any other comments?
Quickly, I wanted to apologize to Marianne because your book Medieval, which is really good as well as being really good looking. I basically in working on figuring out the title and cover for the my book, I'm entirely just stealing from you because my goal is just to basically make my cover look like yours because it looks so good. So and it is a really terrific book as well. Oh, I've been invaded. All right, I'll mute myself.
Thank you, Matthew. What piece of artwork did you end up using for your cover?
It's from the Swedish mural, the little detail death playing chess. Oh, Ellie, baby, watch out. Uh-oh, we're running into trouble. Okay. It's the partial inspiration for the movie The Seventh Seal.
Got
I
it.
believe.
Can I just make a general comment with all three of you? I'm a big fan of all. One of the things I like about your works is you all have a perspective on the truth that is all encompassing. So you don't shy away from the horrible stuff that goes on in this world of ours, but you also affirm the presence of the good, which is a part of reality that needs affirmation sometimes. And I find that inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I hope we succeed.
Thank you. Yeah.
Matthew, there's a chat question about your podcast link, a link to your podcast. People want to know how to get to your podcast.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can. I'll see if I can put a link in the chat. It's you can also just go to my website, MatthewBuckleySmith.com, and there's a page on there. But I'll try to put a link in the chat. It is it's a very dumb and profanity filled podcast. So just be warned. Take like my contribution to this reading, and then dial the class down several notches, and that'll be roughly what to expect for the podcast.
I'm just in the audience, but I was at Swanee when Joanna and Matthew were there, and Joanna was pregnant with the first baby. I just wanted to mention that, and it's so lovely to see them.
Hey, Miriam. Yeah, this is here, Josie. Come. This is the first one here. Can't tell if I'm visible or not.
Yes, she's visible. Thank you.
You.
And I'll add that if you're on Spotify, you can get Matt's podcast there. That's why I listen to him.
Ah, yes.
Oh,
I put a link in there. I don't know if that should work, but I hope.
Yes, it's there. So, yes.
Okay, I see a question in the chat from Cameron Clark. I noticed that a lot of the poems read seem somewhat drawn from autobiographical experiences. So I wonder whether you see autobiography or imagination as more important to your work. Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
I will confess that I have a lot of trouble drawing poems purely from imagination or from historical prompts. And if I haven't lived a thing, it's hard to start a poem from it. And I kind of hate that because I feel like I have milked all the really strenuous experiences in my life and need to have something else to draw on. So it's a bit of a stuck place. There you go. I've admitted it now.
Yeah, I find imagination is really important to autobiography. I would say just having any sense of what's going on. Oh, right, having crisis.
I'm on net.
There was the Auden the anecdote about how he two young poets came to him. One said he had lots of great ideas to express, and one said that he had nothing to say, but he loved technique, and Auden's faith was with the one who had technique but nothing to say. That's sort of how I feel myself. Oh, all right, I'm going to mute myself before you get me too much.
Anybody else want to talk about that? I don't know about Frank. Are you still there, Frank? I think you might have run out of bandwidth.
I apologize if I appear to be particularly unresponsive, but my video and audio keep cutting out. So
Yeah,
I'm missing
there you go. Yeah, I know. If there's some problem. Okay. Does anybody else want to comment or have a question or?
On the autobiographical question, I do think autobiography is fictional. We may not realize it, but we present a certain persona to the world that might not be what others see. And I find it useful. There's a model in science fiction and fantasy writing to fracture a fairy tale, to take a common story and put a twist on it. And I know that's been very fruitful for a lot of poets, to take a known story or myth and modernize it, or come at it from a different angle of empathy. And I find myself doing that with my own life as subject of poems sometimes. And I wonder if the other poets have any comment on that. There's also, with regard to writing about real life, my kids, for example, are very concerned about how they are represented in work that might be in any degree public. And so I'm very sensitive to the fact that when I'm writing about my life, I don't really feel I have the right to exploit theirs. And I know exploiting others' lives is very rich material for poets. So I wonder if the authors would like to comment on where you draw the line, or if you're conscious of that, or if you're completely shameless.
My wife always wants me to add the addendum and the caveat to my poems that we have a good and happy marriage, and and she's a wonderful person. And so sometimes the tone in the poems can be kind of dark, but yeah, I think probably it would be. Unfortunately, it's plenty of people have pointed out a happy, calm, and contented life doesn't often inspire a lot of lyric poems. So unfortunately, there can be an angst bias when it comes to representing your home life, I think.
I suppose I feel that it's poetry, and it's only going to be read by fellow poets, and they'll probably understand.
I've found that my children don't mind if I talk about their childhoods. They don't want to be talked about in their adult lives, and that's fine, because I don't get very deeply into their adult psyches. So if I write about what my daughter was like as a baby, I'm pretty safe.
Yeah, it seems like maybe there's some value to like thinking about, or maybe I try to do this, maybe not always successfully, thinking about like whether the there's a debate that's been going on for a long time about whether you can write in poems things that didn't happen to you, and people come down really hard on either end of it, saying, "Oh, you can make everything up; it doesn't matter," or this should really be like a diary, an autobiography. And I think probably some of the difference. I think like a meaningful criterion is, does the force of the poem come from the dirt you're supplying? Like, are you dishing, and is that what makes the poem compelling? And I think as long as what you're writing about is not the power of the poem doesn't simply come from sort of a titillating exhibition, then I think then you're on safer terrain than if you're just writing about something that happened to somebody you know because it's so wild and cool.
I guess part of the creativity in autobiography is how do you change the details just enough that either someone doesn't recognize himself or I forget which, there was a famous author who said the trick to writing about a real person in your life is to change the details to make them much worse so that they will never come forward and say, hey, you wrote about me.
Annie Finch says that you should give them, you should give all of your fictional exes very diminutive genitals. I'm trying to use Latinate words. I think it's very funny advice. I think it's sort of horrible for a number of reasons, but yeah, that was she in Bird by Bird. She gives that advice.
Changing your pronouns is another good trick. Never write about yourself as I, you, and he or she are good veils to hide behind.
I don't know, Julie. I think that I would take your maxim, and in my view, it would be if I can't make the person any worse, then at that point they're worth writing about. Short of that, they're probably not worth writing about.
Yeah, Frank, I have to say, I have to bring this poem up. You have a poem about Mrs. Alfred Uruguay, the
Yeah.
Wallace Stevens poem, and it's about that poem, but you think that he was kind of making a bawdy joke.
I do.
You do.
Well, it's a private theory. I've never actually heard anybody articulate it, but I would commend you to the poem. I mean, if you do know a lot about, if you do know that Stevens was an executive, he was a horrible, reprobate in many ways, and he would go down to the canoe club and knock back martinis with the guys. And I'm certain that at some point, somebody probably told a joke that was just that crass. And in reading the poem, it seems to me that he has just taken the bones of that and embellished it with all his Stevensian frou-frou. But if you really, pardon the expression, strip it bare, that's what it is. That's the bones of it to me. So I couldn't resist writing that poem. And I do realize that it can sound crass, but I was trying to do some reverse engineering of his poem.
Yeah, I went back and read the poem, and I wasn't quite sure, but it's an interesting reading. I mean, I think it was certainly, he was capable of that. Yeah.
I do wince every now and then when I come across that poem, so yes.
Okay, well, one last call for questions. Okay, well, if there's nothing else, I just want to thank all of our readers. This was really an exceptional reading, and thank you so much. And you came in right on time, which is very unusual. And everybody had very good questions, and thanks to Alex. I don't know if we want to go back to Alex, if he wants to tell us about the next reading, perhaps.
Well, we hope to have another reading next month. So just stay tuned to our announcements for that. And if you haven't signed up for our newsletter, you should sign up, and that will be one way to find out when the next reading will be. And thank you all for coming, and especially thank to our reader, Matthew, Frank, and Marianne. It was a delightful reading this afternoon. And thank you, Ellen, for doing such a fantastic job.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yay, Ellen. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
from
Ellen.
the hurricane.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex,
Thank you, everyone.
Matthew, Marianne.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Frank.
Thank you, Marianne.
And I should add that I'll hopefully have the video for this in a day or so without the Zoom bomber interrupt.
He was very brief.
Good.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks again, Ellen.
You're welcome. Bye.